By the end of 1945, something unprecedented in human history began in Nuremberg. An international military tribunal composed of 8 judges from 4 nations set out to examine the crimes of the former leaders of the Third Reich. For the first time, the word genocide appeared in official legal documents. And for the first time, psychiatrists were given access not just to criminals, but to the possible psychological roots of extreme, state-organized cruelty. Among those psychiatrists was one man who came closer than anyone else to answering a disturbing question. Was there a mental illness behind Nazism? Never before had the psychological states of major war criminals been clinically examined as part of an international tribunal. Douglas Kelley understood the enormity of the moment. In his own notes he wrote, "We must learn the why of the Nazi success so we can take steps to prevent the recurrence of such evil." Kelley did not come to Nuremberg to excuse the defendants. He came to understand them, but understanding has a cost. Did Douglas Kelley uncover the secret of what some called the Nazi virus? How did his attitude toward the most famous defendant, Hermann Göring, change over time? And is it possible to come this close to evil without giving something of yourself in return? Because if anyone truly lost something at Nuremberg, it may not have been the men on trial, but the doctor who tried to understand them. By the summer of 1945, a 52-year-old prisoner arrived in Mondorf-les-Bains, a small town in Luxembourg that hosted the American Detention Center for suspected war criminals. He had surrendered to the Allies just weeks earlier, bringing with him 49 suitcases filled with jewel-encrusted ornaments, gold cigarette cases, expensive watches, and nearly the entire world's supply of the narcotic parakadine. After 10 years during which he had wielded almost unlimited power, demanding whatever he pleased, he now found himself in a tiny cell with only a toilet, a bed, a chair, and a table. The bloody collapse of the Third Reich had left him a leader without followers, a commander without soldiers, a prisoner accused of the murder of millions and other crimes against humanity. This was Hermann Göring, former deputy to Adolf Hitler, President of the Reichstag, Commander-in-Chief of the Luftwaffe, member of the Secret Cabinet Council, Reichsmarschall, and a man whose list of official titles seemed endless. Stripped of his drugs and placed on a special diet to cleanse his mind and body for the task ahead, Göring was ready, at least in his own mind, to actively defend his actions at the upcoming Nuremberg Trials. The revelations about the crimes committed by the Nazi leadership were so staggering that the tribunal needed expert analysis of the defendants' mental states. Psychiatrists and psychologists were brought in to determine whether any of the accused suffered from mental disorders that might, in some way, explain their actions. The goal was not sympathy, it was clarity. The scientists hoped to find personality traits that might drive a person to mass murder or to seek the destruction of entire peoples. To do this, the top Nazi officials underwent personal interviews with specialists, graphic psychological tests, IQ assessments, which, even today, remain a common tool in courts worldwide to identify intellectual disabilities that could spare someone from the death penalty. All of the tested Nazis displayed above-average intelligence, with an average IQ of 128, far above the human baseline of 100. 3 figures stood out, with Hermann Göring leading the pack at 138, marking him as the mastermind of the Luftwaffe, a morphine addict, a lover of luxury, and Hitler's supposed heir. It was Göring who was assigned a special psychologist, Douglas Kelley, who had unrestricted access to the prisoner day and night. Once Göring was weaned off his drugs, Kelley could focus entirely on his main research objective, to evaluate the mental state of one of the most powerful men of the Third Reich. His official duty was clear: determine whether Göring was mentally competent to stand trial, but Kelley faced a deeper, more personal challenge. What motivated Göring? What made his personality so dangerous and unique? To answer this, Kelley began with a meticulous study of Göring's biography, from his early career as a fighter pilot in World War I to his friendship with Hitler in the 1920s and to his rise through the Nazi Party hierarchy, eventually commanding the Luftwaffe and being positioned as Hitler's presumptive successor. Based on this background, Kelley began assembling a comprehensive psychiatric profile, laying the groundwork for what would become one of the most psychologically intense studies in history. Kelley later wrote that his work was driven by the need to understand how such evil could arise in a single human being in order to prevent its return. Even at this stage, Kelley sensed that understanding Göring would be as psychologically dangerous as confronting his crimes. When Douglas Kelley walked through the iron gates of Nuremberg prison in the autumn of 1945, the wall was only months behind him, but its shadow hung heavily over every corridor. The stone walls echoed with the remnants of a fallen regime, and inside the cell sat the men whose decisions had reshaped the world, leaving death, destruction, and trauma in their wake. Kelley, a 33-year-old American psychiatrist, carried with him a leather briefcase full of Rorschach inkblots and a firm belief in the power of psychiatry. He believed that the human mind could be studied even at its darkest, that understanding it might reveal why ordinary people commit extraordinary crimes. Douglas McLachlan Kelley was born in California in 1912. From a young age, he displayed a relentless intellectual curiosity. By his 30s, he had earned a medical degree from the University of California, specialized in psychiatry and neurology, and had already made contributions to early research on brain chemistry. His colleagues admired his blend of scientific rigor and fearless curiosity. When the United States Army began preparing for the post-war trials of the Third Reich, a question loomed: were the architects of Nazi terror legally sane, or had ideology-driven madness crossed into genuine psychiatric illness? Kelley seemed the perfect candidate. Brilliant, direct, meticulous, and supposedly free of strong ideological bias, he was chosen as the psychiatric examiner for the defendants. He accepted without hesitation. The prison itself was a cold and forbidding structure, attached to the Palace of Justice where the trials would take place. Its cells held 22 high-ranking Nazis: Hermann Göring, Rudolf Hess, Joachim von Ribbentrop, Julius Streicher, Karl Dronitz, Hans Frank, and others whose signatures had shaped the policies that devastated Europe. Kelley's task was daunting, not merely to observe what these men had done, but to understand how they thought. He began with a combination of interviews, careful observation, and psychological testing. One of his early diary entries revealed the shock of his first impressions. They were not the raving maniacs I had expected to find. They were rational, intelligent, and frighteningly normal. This realization would define his entire mission. The more he examined them, the less evil seemed like a pathology. Instead, he saw conviction, self-justification, and an unsettling ability to rationalize atrocity. Some of Kelley's encounters were especially revealing. Robert Ley, head of the German Labor Front, rationalized the treatment of Jews with chilling casualness. He argued that he would not have killed them, but would have denied them work and shelter, forcing them to leave naturally. Ley insisted repeatedly that he was not a murderer, reacting with anger when confronted with the indictment against him. Rudolf Hess acted erratically, but Kelley believed much of it was theatrical, an attempt to control the narrative, not genuine amnesia. Julius Streicher displayed no remorse and no intellectual sophistication, but he was not psychotic. Hans Frank, Governor-General of occupied Poland, unsettled Kelley in a different way. Frank spoke eloquently about art, music, philosophy, and German culture. He prayed, reflected, and confessed. Before his execution, he told the court, "1,000 years will pass, and Germany's guilt will not be erased." This was one of the most haunting acknowledgments of wrongdoing from the trials. Once Hermann Göring was successfully weaned off his drugs, Douglas Kelley could focus entirely on the main subject of his study, the mental state of the Reichsmarschall himself. Kelley's official responsibility to the International Tribunal was clear: determine whether Göring was mentally competent to stand trial. But he faced a deeper, more personal puzzle: what motivated Göring, and what made his personality so uniquely dangerous? To answer these questions, Kelley began with a thorough study of Göring's biography, from his early career as a fighter pilot in World War I to his friendship with Hitler in the early 1920s, to his rapid rise through the Nazi Party hierarchy, eventually commanding the Luftwaffe and becoming Hitler's presumptive successor. Using this background, Kelley began to construct a comprehensive psychiatric assessment. No relationship affected Kelley more than the one he developed with Hermann Göring. The former Reichsmarshal received him with warmth and theatrical charm. Kelley described how each morning Göring would rise from his cot, smile broadly, offer his hand, and pat the space beside him as if inviting an old friend to sit. Their conversations ranged across politics, philosophy, and the future of Germany. Göring was intelligent, manipulative, and charismatic, with an unwavering belief in his own legacy. He told Kelley directly, "Yes, I know I shall hang. You know I shall hang. I am ready. But I am determined to go down in German history as a great man." Kelley also noted that the prisoner was cynical and full of mystical fatalism, which explained his reluctance to take responsibility for actions during the war, such as the murder of political opponents and participation in genocide. In his original neurological and psychiatric report on Göring, which remained among Kelley's personal papers for the next 65 years, the psychiatrist observed Göring's emotional instability and his narcissistic preoccupation with what he considered the beauty and strength of his own body. Concerned about Göring's heart health, Kelley used this obsession to convince him to lose weight. "When I told him he would look better in court if he lost a little weight, he agreed and began eating less," Kelley wrote. Even more disturbing was what Kelley discovered about Göring's dark side, which contrasted sharply with the charm and eloquence he displayed upon first meeting. This was a man who, as Reichsführer of forestry and hunting, had repeatedly condemned cruelty to animals and had crafted humane laws to protect wildlife. Yet in 1940, he ordered the bombing of the defenseless city of Rotterdam in the Netherlands, destroying its center and leaving 85,000 people homeless. After Göring casually recounted the murder of a close associate he had once orchestrated, Kelley asked how he could bring himself to demand the death of his old friend. "Göring fell silent and stared at me in bewilderment, as if I were out of my mind," Kelley recalled. Then he shrugged his massive shoulders, raised his palms, and slowly uttered in simple, monosyllabic words, "But he stood in my way." What conclusions did Kelley draw from all this? For the International Tribunal, he found the Nazi mentally competent, free of psychosis, and fit to stand trial. Within the framework of his private study of Göring's personality, Kelley declared, "He was, without a doubt, the most ruthless man I have ever encountered." Göring's cruelty did not repel Kelley. On the contrary, it strengthened his determination to understand the prisoner's personality. Over time, Kelley developed an unusually close relationship with Göring. They spent hours discussing German politics, military strategy, and the likely outcome of the upcoming trial. Göring frequently emphasized that many of the military crimes attributed to him, including deliberate violations of international treaties, were committed to strengthen Germany and help the country achieve its goals. "Of course, we were rearming," he said. "We rearmed Germany until it bristled. It's a pity we didn't rearm even more. Of course, I treated treaties like toilet paper. Of course, I wanted to make Germany great. If it could be done peacefully, fine. If not, then so be it. When they told me I was starting a war by building up the Luftwaffe, I replied that I certainly wasn't opening a school for girls." In more candid moments, he revealed other motivations to Kelley. In intimate conversations on the cot in his cell, he sometimes admitted that his primary drive was to achieve supreme power for Hermann Göring within the Third Reich, Kelley recalled. At times, Göring claimed self-preservation was his main motive. When Kelley asked why Göring had always sided with Hitler, even during the Führer's most disastrous plans, and when Germany was failing, Göring replied sarcastically, "Please, show me any German today who isn't 6 feet under." During their conversations, Göring stated that, as the last surviving member of the government, he felt enormous responsibility not for his crimes, but for how history would judge him, as Kelley noted. Göring accordingly planned his courtroom strategy. "Again and again," Kelley wrote, "he boastfully told me, 'Yes, I know I shall hang. You know I shall hang. I am ready. But I am determined to go down in German history as a great man.' If I cannot convince the court, at least I can convince the German people that everything I did was for the great German Reich. 50 or 60 years from now, statues of Hermann Göring will stand across Germany, perhaps small statues, but one in every German home. Göring lamented that some of his Nazi colleagues had changed their stance at the last moment, but not me, he declared. Kelley openly admired Göring's straightforwardness and respected him for what he described as his extraordinary love and tenderness toward family and friends. Yet no admiration could diminish Kelley's sense of duty to his own government. Infrequent reports to General William Donovan, founder of the future CIA, who at the time assisted the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg, Kelley shared information from his conversations with Göring that under ordinary doctor-patient circumstances would have been considered confidential. In a memorandum dated November 11, 1945, Kelley revealed Göring's courtroom defense strategy and his idea to call British Lord Halifax as a witness to confirm Göring's willingness for a peaceful settlement before the war began. 2 weeks later, Donovan learned from Kelley that Göring had taken full responsibility for Germany's four-year plan of the 1930s, a complex of economic and military reforms that violated the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, ending World War I. Despite this, Kelley sympathized with Göring. He requested that Donovan soften the hard wooden benches in the Nuremberg courtroom for Göring and other defendants, taking into account their age and health. Kelley found himself in a professionally precarious position. What exactly was his role? Was he Göring's doctor, his confidant, a psychiatric observer, or an informant? Never before had a psychiatrist formed such a close relationship with a high-profile prisoner of war. To whom did Kelley owe his loyalty? To his patient, to the tribunal, or to his own conscience? The knot only tightened as time passed. Göring began to see Kelley not just as a doctor or interlocutor, but as a man with connections capable of solving real problems. And Göring had problems that needed solving. He claimed that at the time of his arrest, the Allied authorities had promised proper care for his wife Emmy and their young daughter Edda. By November 1945, however, the family was separated. Emmy was in an internment camp for civilians near Regensburg, Germany, while Edda was miles away at a nursery in the town of Neuhaus. Göring wanted to write to them and reunite the family. Kelley agreed to intercede on his behalf with Donovan and personally deliver Göring's letters to his wife. In a note that Kelley kept among his papers, Göring wrote to Emmy, "Today I can send you a letter directly. Major Kelley, the doctor treating me and whom I fully trust, will deliver it to you. You may also speak freely with him." After Kelley successfully reunited mother and daughter, Göring, in gratitude, asked Kelley to adopt Edda and raise her in the United States as his own child if anything happened to Emmy. Kelley's response is unknown, though Edda remained in Germany. Göring was so pleased that he offered Kelley one of his massive rings. According to Kelley's son, Douglas Kelley Jr., the psychiatrist replied, "No, you're a prisoner. You cannot give this to me." Göring then said, "Then I will give you something better and more valuable, a signed photograph." The framed portrait, showing a proud Göring in full military regalia, with his autograph and a flourish of the Reichsmarschall's fading ink, still remains among Kelley's papers. From November 1945 to January 1946, Kelley observed the first weeks of the trial. Initially, he and psychologist Gustav Gilbert planned to co-author a book on the psychology of Nazi leaders, but Kelley abruptly ended the collaboration and returned to the United States, taking with him a wealth of notes and the results of the psychological tests they had conducted. Several months later, the court issued Göring's death sentence, which surprised no one. Yet the Reichsmarschall had one final, audacious move that stunned everyone. Just hours before his scheduled execution in October 1946, guards found his body in his Nuremberg cell. He had swallowed a vial of cyanide, likely smuggled to him by a sympathetic prison guard. Kelley reflected on the act with a mixture of awe and respect. His suicide, shrouded in mystery and highlighting the impotence of the American guards, was a masterful, even brilliant, final touch, one that Germans would remember for years to come. When Kelley published the results of his study on Göring and the other Nazi criminals a few years later, He relied on generally normal Rorschach test results, which he interpreted with care. He concluded that Göring and his associates were ordinary men, and that their personalities were the kind you could meet in any country in the world today. After Nuremberg, Douglas Kelley left psychiatric practice and tried his hand at criminology. According to those who knew him, after returning from Germany, he became withdrawn, irritable, dark, and depressed. Kelley later taught at the University of California, Berkeley, and worked as a criminal consultant for the Berkeley police, but eventually he lost his emotional equilibrium. For Kelley, one question haunted him relentlessly: how am I different from the people I judged at Nuremberg? During the months he spent with Göring, Kelley likely realized that he and Göring were remarkably alike. Both were strong-willed, forceful, and narcissistic personalities. Kelley began to consider that, like Göring, he too was capable of great evil, and that thought never left him. Kelley's reaction to Göring's suicide is also revealing. By then he was back in America and learned of the event from reporters. They asked him, "What do you think of this?" Kelley replied that he considered it a masterful move. Göring openly showed his contempt for the Allies, saying something like, "You will not be able to hang me, much less hang me as an ordinary criminal. I will leave life on my own terms." Had Kelley's intense closeness to Göring damaged his own psyche? On January 1, 1958, in North Bartley, California, the family gathered: his wife, 3 children, and his father, Douglas Sr. While preparing a holiday meal, Kelley and his wife had an argument. He stormed out of the kitchen and went upstairs to his study. Moments later, he emerged and said, "I can't do this anymore. I can't bear it." He swallowed something, grabbed his throat, and fell down the stairs. In his hand was a vial containing residual white powder, potassium cyanide, the same substance Göring had used in Nuremberg on the eve of his execution. Years later, his son reflected, "I know it's ironic. I think maybe he knew he was on a runaway train. I think he knew what was inside, but he didn't know how to make it go away." Kelley had walked into Nuremberg believing psychiatry could offer clarity. What he found instead were answers that blurred boundaries, challenged assumptions, and followed him until the day he died. His work remains unsettling because it refuses to let us escape the uncomfortable truth he discovered. Monstrous deeds are not always born from monstrous minds, and the psychology of evil lies far closer to ordinary humanity than anyone wants to admit.